It's time to strap in for another edition of the CarsGuide podcast, the show that takes you beyond the test drive. This is episode number 217, Best SUVs Coming in 2022. I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James Cleary, and joining me in looking at the new SUVs heading towards Aussie showrooms this year are two of our brilliant contributing journalists, Stephen Corby and Andrew Chesterton. G'day, fellas.
G'day James.
We'll also take a look at the fresh metal we've been driving this week and dive into your feedback. YouTubers, you can jump ahead via the time codes in the notes or click on the chapter markers in the timeline. So let's go. And we'll kick it off with SUVs. We've got a fair few to cover. We'll do SUVs and what we've called in a companion story, crossovers, both authored by our own Justin Hilliard. Mm-hmm. So we'll go through both. And a name that I haven't heard of for some time kicks it off, Mahindra. And the evocatively named XUV 700. I don't know whether that replaces the 5 and 600, but it's the XUV 700. And it's going to be late this year, but it's going to, I don't know whether you guys took a look at the pic. It looks a bit like a Renault. It's got these Renault-inspired headlights.
Lights, yeah.
But it'll have turbo petrol and diesel power, and I'm sure it will be priced competitively, dare I say, aggressively.
Yep, and at the risk of sounding mean, I had forgotten entirely that Mahindra was even a brand in Australia, so I'm excited to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I was amazed at how not awful it looked.
Yeah, that's good.
A Mitsubishi about it. You'd walk past it, you wouldn't quite know what it was, which might be an advantage.
Yeah, could be. So there's number one off the rank. The second one is huge. It's the second best-selling SUV on the market. The first half of this year, we're going to have an updated Mazda CX-5. So what are we looking at? It's a facelift. So there'll be some cosmetic tweaks. And we're going to have, according to Justin, some variant-specific styling. So it won't be a generic look. There'll be some tweaks here and there according to what you buy. And the big technical change is that Mazda has said enough in terms of its Skyactiv dual clutch auto and put in a 6-speed torque converter automatic. They must have had some customer feedback, I dare say, on that one.
Mate, still missing the one thing that it desperately needs to take on the RAV4, and that is, of course, a hybrid powertrain. So it's a shame that it's not there yet. A proper hybrid, that is.
Yeah, just wins the looks contest. I think, people who are not that concerned about, technology, they look at it and just go, I'd rather have one of those than Toyota.
And
it's really nice.
It's so odd though, isn't it? I'm a fan of the Mazda 3. I love the way that car looks, notwithstanding its blind spot kind of shortcomings that people have called out, including myself. I think it looks lovely, and some people can't stand it. And I just wonder whether the CX-5 is in a similar boat.
But it's not less. Is it less argument? I find the 3 thing amazing. As we know, one of our colleagues describes the 3 as too masculine.
Too masculine.
What 3?
The Mazda 3, our friend Tim Keane says it's too masculine.
Oh, that's crazy. I don't think the CX-5 is quite so controversial, to be honest. It's just a really stylish kind of traditional shape, but certainly I was a bigger fan of the former Mazda 3 design.
Right.
Than the new one.
Interesting.
And split down the middle.
See, because I think you're mental, because I reckon it's fantastic. But anyway.
Let's Mazda 3.
I'm with you. He is mental.
And then a very interesting one up next. We're over into the electric space, zero emissions. The Merc EQB, so we're into a different size segment, the third quarter of this year, and it's going to kick off with what they're calling the EQB 350, 215 kilowatts, dual motor, all-wheel drive, 419 kilowatts of range. It's happening. It's really happening. Merc is making a solid push into that space.
Yeah, and the EQC is a super solid vehicle, so I expect the EQB will be pretty good too.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the range with 4 people in gear in it. Like you're playing 419, are you going to get more than 350?
Right. Well, that'll be our job. That'll be our job, I suspect, to put it to that kind of test. It's a good call.
You expect to road test the car for 350 kilometers, James? No.
All right, another big one, another big gun arriving in 2022, Nissan X-Trail, 4th generation. Now, what are we saying? Mid-size SUV, redesigned inside and out. And look, 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol 4-cylinder engine. That's going to be in a museum soon. And here's a new model arriving, no turbo, no hybrid, but they will have an e-power series hybrid eventually, but that's going to be such a rarity, just a naturally aspirated petrol engine.
Absolutely. But mate, the e-power is exciting. So full disclosure, I haven't driven one, but it is a really interesting take on electrification. So I'm very excited to get behind the wheel of one and see what it's like.
It's a real, it's not broke, don't fix it. Like it is at sometimes X-Trail, the world's biggest selling SUV. But that always just stuns me. Like, yes, it's so popular everywhere. It always just the last few have looked a bit, same. Whereas if I look at the photo of this particular in the rear, it looks like it's going to be a bit cooler.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks great in the front too, but also it's good timing for Nissan too. They're in desperate need of a new product.
Yeah.
And 2022, 2023 looks like they'll finally be getting it. So yeah, good things ahead.
It's true. They've been working hard around Navarra with some of those local, versions and things, but you're right. New product from the factory is very timely.
Absolutely.
Okay, a brand we all know and love is Tesla and the Model X. So late this year, we'll have a revised Model X as well as a plaid flagship. We're going to have a big hulking SUV capable of 0 to 100 in 2.6 seconds.
Yes.
How does that work out in the parking? The car park when you're picking something up on the way home. It's crazy performance.
Watch the road toll skyrocket. To be perfectly honest, I hated the old Model X with the power of 1,000 suns, and I don't see any reason for it to change with this new one, to be perfectly honest.
I don't know about you, Steve, but the thing that got me about the Model X is its proportions. It just looked very big and heavy in the back. There was something quite off about the balance of the design of the car.
It looks like an egg. There's something wrong with it. Yeah. But it's also my favorite of all the thousands of cars that have come to this house, my kid's favorite car. And I always say that what Tesla does brilliantly is that it appeals somehow to the people who are going to grow up and buy the next one.
It's the doors. It's the gold.
They like the doors, but they love the screen in every Tesla, but they love being able to run up and down the corridor in the middle of it.
Amazing. Yeah, that's cool. That's good.
What a horrible waste of those doors, though, to be fair.
Look, like I've said before, we once bought a car because the instruments illuminated blue at night. That was the key selling point.
Did it fart when you put the indicators on?
No. Good point. All right, now what we're on to next, Model X. Then we go. The big gun, the biggest of big guns, the RAV4. It's the best-selling SUV in the country. It's the 5th generation RAV4. It's going to be upgraded for model year 2022. New front lighting, new advanced safety, systems to try and avoid a crash, including rear cross traffic alert, which would be a big one. That Toyota would be behind the pace, but wow, it's onward and upward for the RAV4 if they can get enough of them.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I think this Mazda CX-5 actually outsold the RAV last month because they just can't get any of them. That was before they started shuttering factories temporarily. They couldn't get them when they were at full production. So the big question is, can they get enough of these things to satisfy demand, really?
Yeah. Imagine being a Toyota dealer and just saying, I guess I'd like to sell you one, but I know you're going to walk across to someone else's showroom now and buy a car.
I was amazed. I was watching some of the Winter Olympics on the TV, free to wear, and there were Land Cruiser 300 series commercials. Yeah. I thought, wow, that's got to be a brand building exercise as opposed to trying to shift some metal, because I don't know how many years we're out to waiting for particular models of that thing.
Mate, it's even worse. Skiing, mate, they reckon it's 4 years in Japan at the moment for a 300.
Wow. That's when we'll be ready for, the midlife update.
A facelift, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Given the way the Land Cruiser family works, that it'll be around for about 72 years. So,
correct. Yeah, good point.
Quite ready for an update.
We were talking about facelifts, Tiguan, but it's the Tiguan Allspace, so the larger version thereof. We've had an update for the, what do you want to call it, the standard Tiguan. This is the Allspace, second quarter, facelift, new front fascia, optional matrix LED headlights, and the LED headlights are becoming pretty much ubiquitous. So if you don't have those, you're off the pace. So all of a sudden, and a new multimedia system, new climate controls, and all kinds of stuff. So that one's copying the same kind of update that the Tiguan did.
Yeah, awesome. Mate, I think Volkswagen do the in-cabin tech better than just about anyone, really. So that update will be cool for that car.
Sweet.
The Allspace is weird. It's so big, it looks like it's pregnant.
Does it? Yeah.
Yes. All right. And look, sticking with Volkswagen and Tiguan, Tiguan R. So it'll be the first R-branded SUV sold here. And with the Australian appetite for performance cars, for performance variants of things, witness AMG, Hyundai's success with N, BMW M, all of that stuff, per capita, we just go nuts for these things. So Volkswagen's obviously tapping into all of that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the performance SUVs, to be perfectly honest, but I'm sure they'll sell plenty of them.
No, I was reviewing the Kona R, and I remember saying in the video, it just kind of came to me. I said, once again, we're trying to make a high-riding SUV handle like a low-slung sports car. Right. Makes no sense, but here we are. You know, this is what we're trying to do.
Not quite as sporty.
Every time I drive Macan, it's the same thing. Like, this is a Porsche, is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I actually think Macan do it better than most, to be fair. But I just think it's not as fast, not as performance focused as a hot hatch, not as comfortable as an SUV. So it's kind of
it's probably a whole other discussion. But I think Porsche is kind of getting to grips with what an SUV is. The early ones were a bit, but I think they're kind of getting an understanding for it now. But that's a whole sidetrack we could go down at another time. Now, here is a brand that has not been setting the world on fire in terms of sales. It's just a trickle of cars going out of the Citroen showrooms. But we're going to have a C5X in the third quarter. So it's a mid-sized SUV. You'll have a traditional engine, a 1.6-litre turbo petrol, and a plug-in hybrid. So it's on the pace in terms of that. And Justin has very diplomatically described it as for style-conscious buyers.
Yeah. Speaking of Justin, and not to take anything away from this wonderful story, but I do love that he started that one with, "This isn't the Citroen C5 many have come to know and love."
I like how many?
Yes.
Many?
Yeah, that's right.
What I think they've done very cleverly is called a C5X, so they might get some Mazda buyers looking for a CX-5 by mistake.
I did the arithmetic at one point during 2021 in terms of the number of Citroen dealers and the numbers of cars sold. Yeah. And the fraction of a car sold by each dealer every month was just made shocking reading. Anyway.
I play that same game when the numbers come out. Yeah, there are obviously some months when Citroen dealers don't see a single person.
No, that's right. So anyway, maybe the C5X, beg your pardon, will turn things around. Yeah, and the CX-5. Now then, Genesis. This is a brand that, to my mind, has been doing the stealthy, let's build up, don't set big expectations, plant the brand in people's mind, and then try and shift some metal. Their numbers have been growing at a steady, a mild but steady pace. And here we go, the GV70 electrified, so mid-size SUV, all-wheel drive, 360 kilowatts, 700 Newton meters, 0 to 100 less than 5 seconds, and you're going to have a 400 kilometer range.
Yeah, pretty good.
So to me, that's a pretty exciting product. And according to Genesis, so, they're biased. I was talking to them about who's coming into their showrooms, who's going to go for a Genesis. It's an unknown thing. And they said, oh, look, people are curious. There are people who own multiple cars are saying, well, maybe we'll just give one of those a try and see what it's like. So they're getting some bites at that.
I really like them. I had the shooting brake recently. I think it's fantastic. I always love a station wagon over an SUV personally, but that was great. But every time I have a Genesis, you get a lot of people walking up going, what is that?
Yes.
If you're a certain sort of person who wants to be noticed, it's a reasonably affordable way to get noticed, isn't it?
Well, I think it's also because they've got their styling game face on. The cars are good looking, and I forget who I was talking to, one of the members in our team, saying it was misattributed as a Bentley. Is that a Bentley?
Yes.
That kind of stuff, like really high-end stuff.
Especially that GV70 electrified too definitely gives off some sort of Bentley vibes at the front end, doesn't it?
Yep. Now, next up, we're into Lexus's, what is shaping up as the best-selling model for the brand, the Lexus NX. So this is one where it's pretty much on arrival. This story ran over Christmas and New Year. And so this one was set for January, but it's happening. 179 kilowatt NX 350, first plug-in hybrid PHEV. And it will only reinforce that car's position, I imagine, as Lexus's bestseller. It's the way into the brand.
Yeah, I think the 350 is the regular hybrid, isn't it? The 450.
Oh, 450H. That's right. It'll be even more, 227. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, I drove all of those yesterday, but unfortunately, due to an embargo, I can't tell you anything about it except this.
Does it look better than that photo?
Oh, it looks like it's the first time I've sat in a Lexus ever and thought, oh, they've got it right.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
And it's only partly because they've got rid of that stupid mouse thing.
Oh, it's gone.
Remote touch. It's called remote touch.
Giant screen. It is.
That's good.
Quite revolutionary.
Good, because I think there was a real reluctance through, I don't know what it might have been, loss of face or whatever.
Lexus customers love it, James. I've been told so many times. Oh, no, you don't like it, but Lexus customers love it.
Okay, well, they've got rid of it for whatever reason. It must be for some other reason, just to spite their customers. Yes. And then we were talking about Mazda only moments ago, CX-60. So a mid-size SUV, it slots into that ever, more finely sliced range of Mazda SUVs. It's a 5-seater, but it's the beginning of this new kind of generation of rear or all-wheel drive and inline 6-cylinder engines and plug-in hybrid powertrains. Mazda going in a distinctly different direction, which I think is a bold but really positive move.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the CX along the regular Cs kind of makes sense for Mazda now, don't they? We know it works with the CX-30, for example.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, if you're going to go for a more premium positioning, the inline 6 and rear-wheel drive would be in line with that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that car drives.
But I also think that Lexus and Mazda are both about to prove that plug-in hybrids can be exciting and not just economical.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. All right, now, Range Rover. This is, the granddaddy of them all, really. You could argue that the original Range Rover kicked off the whole luxury SUV thing when it was a 4-wheel drive that happened to be pretty comfy to get around the farm in. But the headline act of this new one, which is arriving in June, is going to be the P530 flagship, and it'll use basically a BMW M engine, 4.4-litre twin-turbo petrol V8.
Wow.
So even though it's a behemoth, it will be fast.
Yeah. And speaking
about sporty SUVs, just yes.
Sorry, mate?
What were you saying about sporty SUV?
Yeah, I know. To me, I know Range Rover has a huge following and plenty of loyalists, but I don't really get it anymore. The idea of a 4.4-litre twin turbo petrol V8,
I know,
2022 seems to touch old school to me.
It's interesting. All right. Well,
I'll tell you what, you got Range Rover. How good are they at design? Like making something that big look good is not easy, but Jerry's a genius. And the Velar is just beautiful. Like I don't like SUVs. That's beautiful.
No, I agree. I think the Defender's a triumph of design as well. I think it looks
same here. Love it. Yeah, that for years, for a decade or more, they've just been turning out consistent winners in my eyes. Anyway, always subjective, but there you go. And then to finish off the SUVs, Skoda Karoq. So it's going to be a subtle kind of nip and tuck, according to Justin. It's the usual suspects. The bumper gets a makeover, wider intake, redesigned headlights, fresh alloy wheel designs, and on it goes, slimmer taillights. We're going to carry over with a lot of the powertrains, but so it's getting a zhuzh up, as they would say, around March.
Yeah. All right. I don't understand why I see so few Skodas on the road.
It makes really so much sense because 2020 was a pretty good year for Skoda. 2021 wasn't as strong. It's really it's difficult to work out, but I think it's a brand with a lot to recommend it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, now we're into what we're calling crossovers, but I just see it as more SUVs because we ran it as a separate story.
They are 100% SUVs.
That's right. Now, this Cupra, we've got a bit of a head start on Cupra because our very own Tung, our temporary correspondent in Dublin, Ireland, has driven and tested, reviewed on video as well, the Cupra Formentor, which we're going to receive in June. So it's a new brand, completely fresh to the Aussie market. It's sprung out of performance variants of the Seat brand, and now Volkswagen spun it off to be a standalone performance one. And we'll get the Ateca or Ateca. I'm not sure quite how to pronounce it. The Ateca is the larger of the two. It's related to the Skoda Karoq that we were just talking about. The Formentor is more golf related. So, you're talking about 220 kilowatt plus flagships for both of them. Cupra is pretty determined to make a splash when it arrives here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how that all unfolds, to be honest. I haven't been following the Cupra story too closely, but where are they positioning it? Is it between Skoda and Volkswagen, or
I think at first flush you go, I'd say that's where it would be, but time will tell, really.
Yeah, right.
So I think hats off for coming up with a new word, Formentor.
Yeah.
Formentor. As said before, it sounds like something out of Harry Potter.
Yeah,
you've got your Dementors and your Formentors.
And your Formentors.
Yeah, that's right. So then we go to Honda. Here's another one with aspirations to move up market, and we've spoken at length about their business model and how customers will be able to access the product. But HRV is a pretty important one. 5th generation version of the car. It's set to become Honda's bestseller, and we'll have a hybrid powertrain.
Yeah, and couldn't come soon enough.
Couldn't come soon enough. So it'll be what we tend to call self-charging. So a bit like Toyota's hybrids, with a naturally aspirated petrol engine as the entry-level option. So that's one to wait for. And yeah, it's early 2022 as well.
What I do like about that picture, mate, is it looks like they've taken a little bit of styling inspo from the Honda E, which I love. So that rear sort of harks to that model for me. Yeah, it could be cool.
And looks like a Brent van.
Can confirm there are a few Honda E's in Australia that have been brought in as low volume imports. A couple of Facebook groups I subscribe to that are around spotting particular cars, and I saw a spotto yesterday of an E. There are a few around. Anyway, now we're on to, what are we on to? Kia Seltos.
Yeah,
Kia Seltos in the second half. It hasn't been formally revealed yet, but the design is said to better align with the 5th generation Sportage. And I'm a fan of the Sportage. It's a fairly dramatic departure in terms of a change from the last Sportage. So if this Seltos is anything like it, I reckon I'm going to like it, and other people may too. You're going to get more advanced driver assist systems so that active safety improve, and the 4-cylinder engine could get a more powerful tune, according to Justin. So the Seltos just gets better and better.
Yeah, and look, they know how important that car is for them as well. It's hugely well received. As you know, they sold plenty of them, so there'll be a lot of focus on making this one as good as possible, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah, just kicking design goals. I had a taxi driver tell me yesterday that the same car for 10 years, he's going to sell it and buy a new car just because he loves the look of Kias so much.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Okay.
Loves them. Can't wait to get a Sportage.
Isn't that interesting? Kia is a brand that has made, I mean, stating the bleeding obvious, but it's a brand that's made such leaps and bounds, particularly in just the last few years. Anyway, and the thing that demonstrated that to me was when Kia first took over from Ford as sponsor of the Australian Open. I thought, oh, what? They're like a minnow. Ford was so big as a, and then now it's like perfectly aligned.
Absolutely.
Very prescient move. But anyway, now Mercedes-Benz again, but EQA second quarter. Launched in entry-level EQA 250 trim, so it'll be all-wheel drive, and that's so much easier with electric motors. What are we talking about? 215 kilowatts, 520 newton meters in a little SUV, and a range of over 400 Ks again. So there we go again, Mercedes-Benz going boots and all.
Yeah.
I think I want to see an AMG version. What's AMG going to do with all this electric power?
Well, AMG's heading down the electric path as well. And for a brand that has put so much, focus on the exhaust pipe, that throaty kind of V8 rumble, it would be a challenge for them more than most as to how they get into an electric performance sphere. Now, here's one that is super, super important. The new Nissan Qashqai. It's big one, redesigned inside and out. Tiny little 1.3 litre turbo petrol 4-cylinder, but they'll also have a hybrid powertrain, and it's another e-power Nissan. So again, the hybrid's coming to shore up the offering in Australia and take it up to Toyota, which has owned the hybrid space for the last little while.
Yeah, but a really interesting take on electrification. I really hope Australians respond well to it, because Nissan, to my knowledge, are the only ones really doing that e-power system in which the petrol motor only ever charges the battery. The battery's the only thing that ever runs the wheels.
That's right, yes.
So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how we respond. And again, I can't wait to drive it. I love new tech, and I haven't driven one yet, so it's it'd be cool.
Yeah, I remember because similar layout was such a success. The Holden Volt was huge when it.
That's true. Yeah. And wasn't Mazda going to do the same thing with the rotary? That's the idea, is the rotary would power the battery, but we haven't seen it.
Haven't seen it yet. No. And I remember driving a prototype Audi that had a rotary range extender engine in it as well. They'd bought some rights from Mazda to use the rotary, or by the range from. That was in Japan, of all places. Anyway, now Toyota, talk about boss of the wash. Toyota Corolla Cross. Now this joins the Yaris Cross. As here we were bemoaning the whole notion of a crossover, but Corolla Cross. So it's alleged to slip between Yaris Cross and CHR, and then RAV4 and Kluger. So it splits the difference there, and it's the second half of 2022. Now the Yaris Cross is not exactly cheap, and I just wonder where the Corolla Cross might be pitched in terms of dollars.
Mate, the days of Toyotas being cheap, but by their own admission, are sort of long behind them. The Yaris itself, the city car, is a fortune as well. Mate, there's also long been mailed that the CHR's on the way out, and so these new cross models are going to be the SUV lineup moving forward.
Fulfill that role.
Yeah.
I just see a buyer in the Toyota showroom who can't wait anymore for a RAV4.
Yeah.
This way, sir. Come and have one of these.
Yeah, that's right.
But then will you be able to get a Toyota Cross?
Well, that's true, yes. More.
And then we're back to Volkswagen, third quarter, T-Roc. So it feels like it's only been here 5 minutes. That's because it was around overseas for some time before it landed here. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get an upgrade before you know it. New lights, bumpers, wheels, multimedia, safety improvements, the things that we've seen in some of these others. Mm-hmm. We're going to get a T-Roc R. So that's 221 kilowatts. It'll be all-wheel drive. So all of a sudden, you've got a competitor for things like the Kona N, but all-wheel drive as opposed to front-wheel drive, and that just may do enough to swing some people over that way. It'll be an interesting car once it gets here.
I reckon it's a cool-looking thing, to be honest. Yep. It looks fairly premium and nice. And to be honest, it's kind of if you're going to hot hatchify an SUV, that's the right size, obviously. Yeah. All right. And speaking of the right size, Niro. Kia Niro, what are we talking? Second half of this year. Mm-hmm. Talk about choice, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, all electric. It's based on a concept car called the Hubba Niro from the 2019 New York Motor Show. I remember
it. So spicy.
It's very spicy. Habanero, yes. So what's the scale that they use to rate chilies? Scovilles. Yeah, I wonder where it ranks on the Scoville scale. Anyway, so that's the second half of the year, and we've got a couple to go. MG, such a mover and shaker in terms of repositioning the market and taking a big chunk of share from other brands. It's now the MG ZS EV is the second best-selling all-electric model in Australia, and it's going to get a facelift. And it's going to have two larger capacity battery options. So increased range up to 440 kilometres. And 400 kilometres seems to be the magic number at the moment. If you can get a battery big enough to store enough to go 400, that allays people's fears in terms of I'm not going to run out of juice while I'm out and about. Yep. So for MG, that's a big win.
It just shows that there's so many people coming to say to me, I want to buy an EV, but like they're all too expensive. What's the cheapest one I can get? I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And then we're going to go the last of all, Suzuki S-Cross. And that's a model that I haven't thought of for a long time, but we're going to get a third generation version of it.
Mate, if I'm being totally honest, I could say the same about the brand. Jimny aside. Why not? Let's bring it on, I guess.
Suzuki's in a war with Citroen for the cars that I'd forgotten were still here.
What a war that is. Wow, I wonder if it's using drones or actual hand-to-hand combat. But 7 or 9 inch floating touchscreen multimedia system sounds very exotic. The 1.4 litre booster jet. Turbo petrol 4 and Suzuki turbo engines are generally pretty good. So, and there we might get a mild hybrid version. So it's very much the move into hybrid and on into zero emissions EVs seems to be the theme. So there it all is. That's our mail in terms of what's arriving across that part of the market in 2022. It'd be great to hear what people listening and viewing think about it all.
Question without notice. Most exciting car from both those lists.
Boy.
Well, it's not the Suzuki. I reckon that's have a look at that picture of that Suzuki. It's one of the laziest bits of design I've seen in a long time. If they said that was a car from 1980, I'd go, I believe that.
It looks pretty, generic almost.
It does.
It's a rehash of various Suzuki elements into one car.
Yeah.
I suppose some of the all-wheel drive performance models, a T-Roc R would be a lot of fun. That would be something to drive. I'd put that one forward.
Well, I think the two FEV, the Lexus FEV and the Mazda FEV are going to be quite game changing. But also, I'm very excited about the electric Benzes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll throw Cupra into the list just because I want to see a new brand. I'm excited to try something new.
Very good. I've been around for new.
It's Volkswagen. It's going to be good.
We've all been around for new brands, and Infiniti arrived and didn't work. I've seen Infiniti arrive twice and not work. And what do I want to say? Opel. And various others. So we'll see how Cupra goes. It will be interesting as time passes. Now we're going to move to our garage cars that we can drive right now. In fact, we have been driving. And Chesto, could I start with you, please?
You can.
Give us a thumbnail, a good, a bad, a summation of the car that you've been driving lately, please.
Is the thumbnail pointing down?
Yeah. Which way is the thumbnail going? That's right.
No. Mate, it's look, I spent a lot of time in the Haval Jolion Lux, which is the little SUV that there is sort of making inroads. Not the same size inroads as MG certainly, but sales are sort of going in the right direction in the small SUV segment for them. In fact, they're just behind Nissan. So they are sort of nipping at the heels of mainstream players in that segment. Mate, it's a value story. That's the reality. It's $29,990 drive away. You get a lot of stuff for that, a really nice techie interior, big shiny wheels, a lot of jewelry on the outside. So it does feel like you get a lot of cash for the money. That's the good. So a lot of car for the money, I should say. The bad is that, look, dynamically, it's absolutely got some quirks. The way the cabin interface interacts with the driver definitely has some quirks. So value story, good in a lot of ways, not great in other ways, was how I surmise it.
Very good. Very good. Steve, you've been in a different world altogether. Please give us a similar summary on what you've been steering.
The 911 GT3, my thumbnail is definitely up, but I must say that here is a car that is designed for the track, and if you're foolish enough to take it out on the Hume Highway, you will pay the price. Right. If you take all the sound deadening out of a car, it turns out that it's quite loud. At one stage, I tried to call my wife, and she thought I was trapped in a concrete mixer and called for help. And the ride's also a little bit shifty over things like concrete expansion joints, but then you're suffering going, why am I doing this? And then you get to the Macquarie Pass, and it's just superlatively wonderful. And it's all worth it. It's all worth putting up, even 430,000 reasons to put up with how good it is.
Amazing. Fantastic. All right. I will finish off with a newcomer, Subaru BRZ.
Great.
Yeah, so this is the S. We've just had it. Our review is up on the site. Please have a look, and we've got a video on YouTube. So now it's 2.4 litre, and it's still the Atmo petrol flat 4, 6-speed manual, rear-wheel drive, all the things from the original one, but more power. So you go up from 152 to 174 kilowatts and 212 to 250 newton meters. 0 to 100, 6.3. So it's rapid without being blistering. But the pluses for me, more grunt. That grunt makes a lot of difference. More grip. The tyres are now not eco-focused tyres. They're Michelin Pilot Sport 4s. And the first thing people did when they bought a BRZ or an 86 was go 1 inch up and put 18s on the thing. So Subaru's done that, and they're 18s now. The gearbox, the steering, all of that driving enjoyment is still there. On the minuses, I'm not so sure about the nose treatment, whether that's a step forward, just a subjective thing. And look, it's the nature of the car. It's not exactly practical. You're buying this to enjoy it as a car, and it's a few grand dearer. So you're getting all this stuff, but it's just a little more expensive. So that's a negative, but it's a massively enjoyable car to drive.
But I love that car. It's an example like the MX-5 of a car where you don't have to be going that fast to be having a great time. And 6 seconds is, as you say, it's not very fast. It's a real world sports car.
Yeah, and wind that thing out, and the flat engine gets a really interesting note up in the higher register. It's huge fun. It's huge fun. All right, that's great.
Does it feel new enough, JC? Does it feel like a new car?
Well, look, I suppose that's the balancing act, isn't it, Chesto? You've got a formula that's been well received, yet you've had some feedback about power and grip and all these things that have addressed all of that, and yet kept the good traits, the good elements from the early one. I'd say it's a successful upgrade.
Awesome.
It's cosmetic as well as, fundamental in terms of how the car behaves.
And the only thing you ever needed was more power.
That's it.
You ever wanted more power. So.
That's it. So they've done it. Awesome. Now, we're going to go back to some feedback on last week's show, and we were talking about best EVs arriving. So we've got the comment of the week. It's on top of the shipping container at the front of the CarsGuide forecourt. There's bunting around there, balloons, and it's J Rosie 777. He says, interesting podcast. The reality with electric cars is to get decent range, you need an 80 kilowatt hour battery or larger. 3 things you inherit are weight, unnecessary performance, and the problem of battery recycling, especially as we have no mega car battery plants. The performance issue is a real worry, as non-performance oriented drivers are now driving vehicles that are twice as fast as they originally had. And he's not wrong. I mean, electric cars, even if the outright power figure isn't as high, the acceleration is much more urgent, With Australia's million-plus car market and 500,000 tonnes of batteries per year eventually reaching end of life, storage, fire hazard, toxicity, and expense to recycle and export battery materials, we're heading down a road blindly. Our grid might be old, but it's worth many billions of dollars, so who's going to subsidise the replacement? With cars coming on board and moving to carbon neutral generally, we'll need to triple the grid we have now. Manufacturers are being forced by the EU to go electric, but they have over 120 nuclear power plants. So this business model is not a fit for Australia, which still on the East Coast is sometimes still over 90% coal and gas powered at night, which makes those who charge overnight blind as they don't factor the extra 5 tonnes of CO2 pollution to manufacture electric vehicles and the distance required to drive to negate their overall carbon footprint. It's a fool's game.
Wow.
And the media should be educating the public.
Hang on, we're the media?
Okay.
I know. Here we are doing our bit.
I have 3 problems with this. One is the phrase unnecessary power. The second is you have to understand what V2G is going to do. And we're running trials of this at the moment. So if you've got your electric car plugged in and there's too much strain on the system, within 1/10 of a second, that electric car can put the power back into the grid. And in an ideal world, we've got the fastest rollout of solar panels in the world. You charge that car with your solar panel during the day, you leave the power in it, and then the power can support the grid. So I think once people get their head around V2G and once that starts getting rolled out, that'll make a huge difference. The third thing is not so much a problem, and I kind of agree that I would be terrified if my teenager was learning to drive in even our Kona EV, because it's not, they say it's not fast, but it is the potential it has, particularly in the mid-range, to rip your head off is quite frightening.
Yeah, it's different. It's a different characteristic altogether in terms of...
You wouldn't want someone learning that, would you? Like a learner is not going to cope with that temptation, I guess is the thing.
I've got a similar series of rants, but there are some things I agree with. My first point is this whole idea of, to get decent range, you need an 80 kilowatt hour battery. I disagree with. I think this obsession with driving range is the wrong way to look at EVs. We know how far the average Australian drives every day. I think from memory, it's 33.6 kilometres. So essentially, the average Australian would need a range of 50 kilometres to have a safety to get to work and home and plug in again overnight.
It's more about recharging speed.
Yeah, so this push for 1,000 kilometres, 80 kilowatt hour batteries, I just think that's the wrong way to look at EVs. You need to look at how they fit into your life. Secondly, the performance issue, I agree with that. I remember when I first drove that Tesla, which was 0 to 100 in, minus 6 seconds.
Yeah.
I did think to myself, man, this is like really verging on dangerous for people who aren't, like you're getting Lamborghini beating speed for people who might have just swapped out of a Camry. That's a scary sort of blend, a scary mix. And finally, my final point on this is, yes, look, Australia's energy supply is a global embarrassment. There's no denying that, but that's no reason to not make the shift. We just need to look at it more holistically.
Yeah,
we can't say because we burn coal and gas we shouldn't have EVs. Perhaps we should be looking at burning less coal and gas. Would be my.
That's interesting. It's interesting. My 2 bobs is it puts me in mind of Milton Morris, former New South Wales Transport Minister, would be spinning in his grave because he was responsible for the killer supercars headline that knocked over the GTHO Phase 4 and all of that muscle car stuff in Australia. And at the risk of sounding like a free market economist, I think these things have a way of working themselves out according to people making a buck from it.
I agree.
So if there's a demand, people will find a way to meet that demand and score some dough from it.
And if I can have one,
the choices are out of Australia's hands, aren't they? Because if the rest of the world goes electric, we don't have a car. We don't have our own car. So just, if you're getting electric cars, deal with it.
That's exactly my point, Corbs. This whole idea of like, we don't do electric cars in this country. We also don't build them. So that it will get to the stage where you'll get driven or you'll walk. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, good feedback and good discussion. Thank you. With that, we've reached the finish line. So I want to say thank you, Steve. And thank you, Chesto.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks to our podcast production champion, director of schmoozing and head geek, Mr. Pritchard, for his slick recording and editing skills. Today, he's wearing a T-shirt saying there's a 99.9% chance that I don't care. Elephant pants and lobster slides.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's a good look. It's striking. Jump into the conversation. CarsGuide's on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. Apple Podcast listeners, please take a moment to rate and review the show. 5 is the preferred number. That'd be good. Thank you. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe to the CarsGuide YouTube channel so you can stay on top of all our latest content. But before we go, a mate of mine was driving on an outer suburban kind of semi-rural road when a cat darts out in front of him. He tries to avoid it, but to no avail. Gets out, the cat's wearing a collar, so he knows it's a pet, and feeling terrible, he looks around for the nearest house. Spotting a place not too far away, he heads up the drive, goes up to the door and knocks. Bloke answers the door, and my mate says, "Hello, look, I'm terribly sorry, but I think I've run over your cat." Old mate says, "Well, we have several cats. What did it look like?" Mate says, "Look, hard to say, really. Sort of startled, I suppose."
Yep.
Jason. Jason.